Every great faith began with fire, with a founding conviction strong enough to reorder life and demand loyalty beyond convenience. None began as a cultural ornament or political accessory, yet history presses a sobering question upon every religion. What did it choose to preserve when power entered the picture? Because when influence grows and institutions harden, what a faith defends over time reveals what it truly worships. Fire exposes purpose, but preservation exposes priorities. Across history, religions have preserved different things: law, land, culture, authority, identity, or suffering, and those choices continue to shape political systems and human conflict. Judaism and Israel occupy a unique place in this discourse because Israel did not begin merely as a religion, but as a covenant people directly governed by God. From Abraham through Moses, Israel was formed as a nation under divine law where Torah functioned not only as spiritual instruction but as moral, civil, and communal order. Land, lineage, worship, and obedience were inseparable, and God Himself was Israel's king. Crucially, when Israel later demanded a human king in order to be like the other nations, this request was not aligned with God's perfect will. Scripture records that God granted them a king in displeasure, warning them through Samuel that kings would tax them, conscript their sons, take their daughters, and burden the people. Israel's monarchy, therefore, was not God's original design, but a concession to human desire for visible power, security, and political normalcy. Even then, Israel's kings were never absolute. They remained subject to the law and answerable to the prophets, who confronted kings openly when they violated God's covenant. This distinction matters deeply because Judaism's political relationship is rooted not in expansion or conquest, but in covenant preservation and survival. After the destruction of the temple and centuries of exile, Jewish identity was preserved through law, memory, tradition, and communal boundaries rather than political dominance. Modern Israel represents a historic return to sovereignty, where ancient covenant identity now intersects with modern statehood, producing tension between divine calling, secular governance, and international politics. Judaism's influence on political structure is therefore shaped by the struggle to preserve identity under power and without it always carrying the memory that human kingship itself was a guarded and conditional allowance, not the ultimate hope. Islam, by contrast, emerged from its inception as a religio-political system. Its founder functioned simultaneously as prophet, lawgiver, military leader, and head of state, uniting faith, governance, and law into a single structure. This framework has been consciously preserved by some adherents across centuries, making Islam's political influence direct and structural. In such a system, the separation between mosque and state is not foundational but foreign, and political dissent can easily be interpreted as religious rebellion. Modern jihadist movements, while rejected by many Muslims, are not inventing something new so much as attempting to revive early models of governance where belief expands through authority and law, sometimes by force. Reform becomes difficult where religious obedience and political loyalty are fused. Buddhism and Hinduism follow a different trajectory. Buddhism began with renunciation, as its founder rejected kingship and worldly power in pursuit of enlightenment, while Hinduism historically allowed a broad plurality of spiritual paths and expressions of the divine. Yet, when these traditions became embedded within nations, they gradually transformed into cultural and institutional authorities. In several regions, Buddhism has become tied to ethnic identity, temple influence, and national loyalty, serving as a stabilizing force for political order rather than solely a path of detachment. Hinduism, particularly in modern reform and nationalist movements, has shifted from spiritual diversity toward political consolidation, temple control, and identity-based governance. In these contexts, religion governs not through conquest but through culture, where tradition is sanctified and dissent becomes social betrayal. What began as spiritual wisdom is preserved as cultural power. Christianity stands apart not because Christians are superior, but because its founder categorically refused political authority. Jesus rejected kingship, rebuked violence, and declared that his kingdom was not of this world. He established no state, claimed no land, and codified no civil law. The apostles followed this pattern, and the apostle Paul explicitly warned that no soldier of Christ should entangle himself with the affairs of this life, lest he cease to please the one who enlisted him. Christianity was politically disarmed at birth because its warfare was never legislative, military, or territorial. Its battlefield was the conscience, its weapon was truth, and its aim was redemption rather than control. This posture explains Christianity's enduring collision with political power. Christianity asserts that kings answer to God, that laws are not moral merely because they are legal, that tradition can be wrong, and that truth does not depend on majority rule. For this reason, Christianity is tolerated when it is silent, celebrated when it is symbolic, and persecuted when it is prophetic. Empires can accommodate religion that blesses their authority, but they cannot endure a faith that judges it. History confirms the pattern. Judaism preserves covenant and identity while remembering the danger of human kingship. Islam preserves governance and law. Buddhism and Hinduism preserve cultural order, but Christianity preserves the cross. This outcome is not accidental. Each faith continues to guard what it carried from its beginning. Religions aligned with power are preserved by power. Religions tied to culture are defended by culture. Christianity, which refuses both, is opposed by them all. Its persecution is not evidence of failure, but of fidelity. The faith that began with a cross never sought a crown, and even Israel's own history testifies that when God's people demand kings like the nations, the cost is always higher than expected. The world has never been comfortable with that lesson, but history keeps teaching it all the same.